Another journalist is injured in Ukraine. Not killed this time, but injured. So we'll talk just a bit about that, what that means, and where we go. The View calls on Tucker Carlson and Tulsi Gabbard to both be arrested as Russian agents. So we'll go into what's going on with that. Joe Manchin proves to be another thorn in the side of Joe Biden, as he appears that he is going to block Sarah Raskin. So we'll go over just a bit about what's going on with that. And the Rittenhouse gun is officially destroyed. It is no more. It is going to be all of this and more over on Contemporary. You're just mad you can't date me. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Good morning, Edheads. Welcome to Contemporary. My name is Jay Edgar, and we have got, well, it's slowing off here. I've noticed this about what the news cycle has been doing lately. It's starting to slow off on the Ukraine stuff. And honestly, if it hadn't been for Ukraine stuff, I probably wouldn't have been able to fill the show to an hour and a half to 2 hours today, just because there's a lot of stuff there, but it's, as far as going outside of what's happening in the war, it's actually kind of light today. So we'll talk just a bit about that and what that is. But I mean, I'm looking at the tabs right now, and probably about half of them are the Ukraine stuff. Not even, I don't think. Let's see, where does that go? Maybe yeah, it's about half. So we'll talk about that. We'll get through all the stuff with going on over there. We'll probably fly through that, honestly, just because there's so much fatigue. The news media doesn't want to talk about it anymore, but we'll talk about it. We'll get the down low on that. We'll get what everything else is going on with that over here this morning on Contemporary. Let's get the live chat up here so we can see what you guys are saying. So weird to see Ron Helton over on the YouTube side. He is a D-Live for life usually. Actually, he's a Trovo for life, but since Trovo screwed everybody over, I haven't felt right going back to him. I know Steven went back over to Trovo, but I haven't felt right going back to them because I don't want them to be rewarded with views because of me. Because they screwed over so many people that were important to me and people who were formerly important to me too. But anyway, let's get into it. Let's get started. But before we do, make sure you guys head over, check out turnsofpagesproductions.com. Turns of Pages Productions is going to be your one-stop shop once we get launched for all of your news and commentary needs. On the network, we will carry such great shows as The Daily Ignoramus, The Breakdown with Birkenhoff, The R-Rated Conservative, The Porch Boys, and a new upcoming project with Britt and Sean Hickman. So go and check all that out. That's going to be a great time. And if you guys are in the know, you guys probably already know the name. There will be a name docs coming up on the Brian Nicholas show for the people that aren't in the know. But we do have the Give, Send, Go. I've not been sharing it out very publicly yet. Just kind of privately for the people that are in the know. A lot of the people here have hung out with me at some point here. But you can go check out givesendgo.com/turnsofpages101 if you want to help us get up off the ground here. We've got a $20 donation in already. But we're looking to raise $2,000 for the website here, so go and check that out. We got to make sure Bobby Joe gets paid, so definitely go and make sure that happens. Go check out the fundraiser. It's going to be a great time. Come and hang out with us there. Help us get the website started and help us support great creators. Looking into the Dow for the morning. The Dow did a kind of a weird thing yesterday. It did a whipsaw. It went up at the beginning of the day, obviously. The futures were pointed up there. At about 11 o'clock in the morning, it turned down and went back below its previous close. And then it clawed back up and then dropped back down again. And then just at the very last second, at the very last moment of trading, they traded enough to bring it back up 1.05 points. Or 0.0032%. in the green. Just barely at the end of the day. I've never seen the Dow close, especially when it went up that far. That close to its line. That's a new one since I started doing this. Now, it might have done that in history sometime before, or even tighter, but that's the first time I've ever seen it get that tight. 1.05 points. That's amazing. So that's what we see coming back up off of that. Looking at your Bitcoin is at 38,634 US dollars and 20 US cents. That is a slight, well, that's not a slight drop anymore off yesterday. Down off yesterday's highs, 1,035 US dollars, or 2.61%. So those of you who had some Bitcoin lost a little bit yesterday, but we'll see what happens with that. Your scrap metal prices, copper turned down yesterday. Copper is down on the average. Steel and aluminum are both up on the average. Aluminum broke 70 cents a pound on the average, so that's on the up and up, definitely. I think, because we've been hovering around 60 cents per pound usually for aluminum. But looking at the prices, all of your copper plays have turned into the red. Everything, including brass shells, which were in the red yesterday. Steel is also mixed. Conduit steel is down. But light iron, number one steel, cast iron, rotors, complete car, shreddable steel, and stainless steel are all up. Aluminum is also mixed, with siding is up. Aluminum copper pin is down. Radiators are down. Cans are down. Sheet aluminum is down. Rims are up. So that's probably going to be turning into the red on the average pretty soon as well. Looking at other plays, electric motors are down, ballasts are down, lead is down, car and truck batteries are up. Catalytic converters all turned into the downswing yesterday. Compressors are down, alternators are up. Carbide is up, hard drives are up, motherboards are up. Power supplies, low-grade boards, and PC towers are all down. So just what it is you need to take to the recycling center based on that information. Remember, these are all national averages. Prices may vary in your specific locality. Looking in at IBD for the morning. Dow futures, NASDAQ breaks lower. China COVID shutdowns are a new X factor, from Ed Carson. Dow futures tilted higher Tuesday, along with S&P 500 futures and NASDAQ futures. China expanded its lockdowns as pinko pox cases increased sharply, sending crude oil prices and the Hong Kong Hang Seng Index tumbling yet again. Well, again, if that seems to be the case and nobody in China is traveling, that is going to be some relief at the pump for you. Because if nobody's traveling in one of the biggest and most populated countries in the world, then that's going to be, hey, all the more oil for us. Let's go buy some more. The stock market rally attempt suffered a big blow Monday as energy, commodity, and tech stocks all retreated as China's new coronavirus lockdowns overshadowed Russia's Ukraine invasion and a looming Fed rate hike. Apple, which looked resilient until recently, undercut key support levels Monday. Tesla is approaching recent lows, but still looks much better rather than EV rivals such as XPeng and aggressive growth plays generally. United Health, Vertex Pharmaceuticals, Costco, Denounce, and Travelers are showing strength. United Health Group, Vertex, and Costco are near possible entries, while Travelers cleared a buy point and Denounce arguably is actionable. But investors should be extremely cautious about buying any stock until market conditions improve dramatically. China's COVID cases topped 5,000 on Tuesday, with the highest in 2 years. While modest compared with the rest of the world, Beijing continues its zero COVID policy that it never actually had. They just stopped reporting on it when it went well. Theoretically, and this is just a theory that I've had looking in at what's happening geopolitically, China does know that they need to throw some chaos into the U.S. Not necessarily, it's because having a slam dunk in one direction or the other is not good for China. When the U.S. is deeply, deeply divided, is where China is. So right now, I would suspect, because they did not eliminate COVID. I can promise you they did not eliminate COVID. They still had it go and rip through their population, do the things that they needed it to do. They did not eliminate it. They didn't eliminate any of the variants. They got Omicron. Well, they have Omicron now, but they had Delta, they had Beta, they had Mu, they had every variant go through there. They just didn't report on it. But now, again, as we're coming up into midterm season, they need to have disarray in the U.S., so they need to have the progressives yelling that we need to lock down forever, and conservatives saying no more lockdowns, and especially moderate Democrats saying lockdowns are unpopular. Pit everybody back against each other, because a weakened U.S. is good for the rest of the world, so says China. That's my theory. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's my theory on what's happening here. China ordered Langfang, a large city near Beijing, to go into lockdown on Tuesday. That follows Sunday's lockdown of Shenzhen, a major tech and supply chain hub. The country has also locked down Shangchun, an industrial province in the northeast. Shanghai has returned to online-only classes. Some neighborhoods are on lockdown, while residents have been asked not to leave the city unless necessary. Xi'an, which had a strict lockdown late last year, also told residents not to leave unless necessary. Beijing residents have been urged to stay inside as much as possible. Foxconn closed its Shenzhen factory, while some automakers cut output as well. Tesla's Shanghai factory has not been affected so far. If China can quickly contain the latest outbreaks and lift shutdowns, it would be a big boost for the global economy and financial markets. But the fear is that the country, sticking to a zero-COVID strategy, will expand shutdowns further and keep them in place for an extended period. With China growth stocks at risk, crude oil, copper, and other commodity prices plunged, hitting energy, mining, fertilizer, and metal stocks. U.S.-listed China stocks from Alibaba to XPEV, already hammered by the reviving delisting fears, continued to crash. Container shipping firms such as Matson and DAC stock rallied. Meanwhile, a U.S. official reportedly said Washington has informed NATO and other allies that China has signaled it's willing to offer military aid and economic aid to Russia. We'll talk about that. To support the Ukraine invasion, but other reports say China would not do so. The U.S. could be publicizing possible China support for Russia's invasion to try to discourage Beijing from going through with it. And also today, this is the other thing that's weighing on the markets right now. The Federal Reserve begins its two-day policy meeting on Tuesday with an announcement due at 2 p.m. Eastern Time Wednesday. Fed Chief Jerome Powell signaled last week that he favors a quarter-point rate hike. Analysts expected a slew of Fed rate hikes in 2022, subject to swings in inflation and economic growth amid a lot of variables. Compared with the Russia-Ukraine war and coronavirus lockdowns in China, a major Fed tightening cycle seems relatively predictable. Tesla and Vortex are on the IBD leaderboard. Matson, United Health, Vertex, and Costco are on the IBD 50. United Health was Monday's IBD stock of the day. So there's a lot of information just in this one little article here. That's right there what I'm most interested to see, what happens with the rate hike, and if that actually does anything, given the fact that the U.S. just spent another $1.5 trillion in omnibus spending, on top of foreign aid that they're putting out there, the rising cost of fuel, the rising cost of goods because of the fuel. So I'm very curious as to where that goes, what happens with that, and if we do still have massive inflation, we will see what happens with that. Let's check on the futures, and we'll grab one from Seeking Alpha. Futures were just above fair value on the Dow. S&P also just a little bit above. NASDAQ futures advanced 0.2%. They were the big winners of the day. Futures are in motion this morning, swinging between solid losses to modest gains. U.S. crude oil prices plunged more than 7%, knifing below the $100 level. That'll be good for us at the pump. The 10-year Treasury yield fell 2 basis points to 2.12%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index plunged 5.7%, continuing a sell-off in tech names. Many are U.S. listed as well. Pinko Pox lockdowns, reviving delisting fears, and concerns about how the Russia-Ukraine war could involve China are all taking a toll. China retail sales rose 6.7% January to February versus a year earlier, far above the 3% expected. Industrial production popped 7.5%, far exceeding estimates of 3.9%. We'll see if that goes away with the new lockdowns in place. Remember, overnight action in Dow futures and elsewhere doesn't necessarily translate into actual trading in the next regular stock market session. A lot of information, a lot of variables weighing on the markets right now. We'll see if they bring them down or boost them back up. Let's grab one from Seeking Alpha just quickly here. S&P slumps ahead of Fed. Nasdaq posts lowest close since 2020. Dow ends near a flat line. From Kim Khan. Stocks were unable to rebound from last week's selling on Monday, with a midday swoon leading another day off losses for the S&P and the Nasdaq. The Dow finished near a flat line, eking out a fractional gain on the session. The Dow gained literally 1 point. With the retreat, the S&P slipped back below 4,200 and the Nasdaq receded to its lowest close since December of 2020. The selling came amid a swirl of uncertainty, along with the ongoing fighting in Ukraine and the reemergence of pinkpox concerns in China. Investors looked ahead to a Federal Reserve decision on interest rates due out later this week. The Dow fared the best out of the major averages, essentially ending the day flat. S&P reversed earlier advances to end 0.7% lower. Similarly, Nasdaq erased modest gains from earlier in the session, showing a closing loss of 2% lower. Reflecting the general weakness set during the middle of the day, 7 of the 11 S&P sectors ended with losses, with a 2.9% drop in energy leading the way. Financials represent the best performing segment. Despite the negative headlines, Kinsale Trading saw signs of hope headed into the session, noting that the S&P 500 didn't fall to fresh lows last week, and we think that's notable. More specifically, this market could be setting up for a near-term rally if we've got any good news. Example, a lasting ceasefire in Ukraine, the Fed not being as hawkish as feared, positive supply news on oil, and that rally could easily send stocks back to the 4,500 to 4,600 range, in part because sentiment has become palpably negative, the firm noted. Unfortunately, I don't believe that to be the possibility for the Ukraine, and the Fed is going to have to be hawkish at some point here as they sit back and look at the progressives, the Biden babies, they actually believe the bullshit that this last month's inflation report was the fault of Russia. They actually believe that. The people at the Fed, they don't believe that. They know better. They know what's going on here. And they know what they have to do to try to keep this back under control. The Fed is going to be as hawkish, if not more hawkish, than they were before. So, that's what we see off of that. Let's get into the big news of the day, starting today with CNN. Fox News correspondent hospitalized after being injured in Ukraine. This is from Oliver Darcy. Fox News correspondent Benjamin Hall, who had been deployed in recent weeks to cover the war in Ukraine, has been hospitalized after being injured while reporting near Kiev, the network said on Monday. We have a minimal level of detail right now, but Ben is hospitalized and our teams on the ground are working to gather information as the situation quickly unfolds, Fox News' chief executive, Suzanne Scott, said in a memo to employees. The safety of our entire team of journalists, they typoed this again, the safety of our entire team, that's what it says on the screen, of journalists in Ukraine and the surrounding regions is our top priority and of the utmost importance, Scott added. This is a stark reminder for all journalists who are putting their lives on the line every day to deliver the news from a war zone. Scott said Fox would provide further updates when the news network knows more. Please keep Ben and his family in your prayers, Scott wrote in her memo. Hall started his career as a war correspondent reporting from the Middle East and Africa and filling reports for several news organizations, including the New York Times, a former newspaper, Sunday Times, Agence France-Presse, and the BBC. In 2015, Hall joined Fox. In his role for the network, he has filed reports over the years from dangerous conflict zones, including Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Hall currently serves Fox's State Department correspondent. He is also the author of Inside ISIS, The Rise of a Terrorist Army, funded by Clinton's and Obama's. Oops, did I say that out loud? Irina Venediktova, a prosecutor general of Ukraine, said in a Facebook post that the attack on Hall was more evidence of Russia's violence, because of course she did, against civilians. Venediktova said she intends to focus on the war crimes that have affected the citizens of our partner countries, according to a Google translation of her post. Once again, awfully convenient. I'm actually willing to bet that Miss Venediktova is probably sitting over here right now saying, Motherfucker, why he not die? Why does he not die? We need to pull US into this. Because, once again, I look at the situation. Now, people like Hall, and people like, what was it, Rowden, the dude's name earlier? I could probably go back and look at the KTZed document and see. Why can't I think of that dude's name? I can see the goofy face that they put up off of him everywhere, but I cannot think of his name right off the bat. But that dude yesterday, I mean, we go all through Iraq with extremists who want death to all Americans, and we don't see nearly the amount of death in such a short period of time. Well, there's only been one death, but death and injury within literally 2 days of each other. When these same people are going out doing war correspondence in Iraq, and yet suddenly, when people are out doing war correspondence in a country that the U.S. refuses to get involved in, all of a sudden we have a death and an injury within a couple days of each other. I'm sorry, that does seem just a little bit suspicious to me. And I don't care how conspiratorial you think that makes me sound. These are people who are well-versed in doing this, who understand the situations that are on the ground very well, who know how to duck and cover, who know how to get out of a bad situation, because they have years upon years upon years of experience off of this. Renaud, that was the dude's name. Yeah, it's not. This is not some fresh face, straight out of journalism school kid that's going over there. This is a person who has been in horrifying the desert, the war theater that went on forever, and yet he's just getting injured right now. Sean Tandon, president of the State Department Correspondents Association, also spoke out Monday about the attack. We're horrified to learn that our fellow correspondent, Benjamin Hall, was injured as he covered the Ukraine war, Tandon said in a statement. We know Ben for his warmth, good humor, and the utmost professionalism. We wish Ben a quick recovery and call for utmost efforts to protect journalists who are providing an invaluable service through their coverage of the Ukraine. Yeah, well, my prayers go out to Ben. I do. I say that right off the bat, and that's automatic. This is a person who went over to somewhere that I wouldn't go, and he got hurt. As far as how he got hurt, why he got hurt, what's actually happening behind the scenes of the fact that he got hurt, I'm sorry, I don't believe the information that's presented to me. I don't know what happened, but I have very, very big suspicions that it's not what's being presented on the front page of CNN. I really don't. So, we'll see what happens with that. And say a prayer for Ben. At the Associated Press, 3 EU nation leaders visit Kiev as Ukraine refugees top 3 million, from Andrea Rosa. So it looks like I do have question on this over what the opinion is over on the Ukraine. I'm going to try to stay out of my opinion. I know I just failed on that in the last article, but I do want to report what's being presented to us and what I feel is right and what I feel is propaganda. Let's look at some images out here while we're at it. Firefighters work in an apartment building damaged by shelling in Kiev. So there they are, up there putting out the fires. Greenpeace activists. Peace, not oil. Firefighters work in another apartment building damaged by shelling. Welders weld metal inside the inner pipe steel plant in Denounce. Thursday, getting steel gas pipes to Texas oil companies and railway wheels to European high-speed train operators has been put on hold as hundreds of inner pipes, roughly 10,000 employees in Ukraine, have joined the fight against Russia. Working with skeleton crews, some of Interpipe's facilities are running their canteens and making metal barriers to block Russian tanks and convoys. Its bomb shelters house dozens of local families at night. Kid playing with a toy horn. Some kids returning to school in Lviv. More of the apartment building. A refugee fleeing. More refugees. More carnage. Ukrainian flag first aid kits. Anyway, so that's what we see off of that. Let's read what the Associated Press has to say. Russia's relentless bombardment of Ukraine edged closer to central Kiev as a series of strikes hit a residential neighborhood Tuesday, while the leaders of 3 European Union countries planned a bold visit to Ukraine's capital, and the number of people in the war has driven from the country past 3 million. Shortly before dawn, large explosions thundered across Kiev from what Ukrainian authorities said were artillery strikes. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said barrages hit 4 multi-story buildings in the city and caused dozens of deaths. The strikes targeted a western district of Kiev, disrupting relatively calm that returned after the initial advance by Russian forces was stopped in the early days of the war. Tuesday's shelling ignited a huge fire in a 15-story building and spurred a frantic rescue effort. As Russia stepped up its assault on Kiev, the leaders of Poland and the Czech Republic and Slovenia announced that they would travel to Ukraine's embattled city Tuesday to show support for the country. The aim of the visit is to express the European Union's unequivocal support for Ukraine and its freedom and independence, Czech Prime Minister Petr Fiala said in a tweet. Let's look at this. So that is the building burning. Petr will be joined by Slovenian Prime Minister Janez Janša, Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, and Jaroslaw Kaczynski, who is Poland's Deputy Prime Minister for Security and the leader of the Conservative ruling party. Leaders of the EU were informed of the trip, but did not sanction it, officials said, an EU official who spoke on condition of anonymity because of the sensitivity of the trip. Said European Council President Charles Michel has pointed at the security risks of such an undertaking. So, as far as the siege, I mean, this is not something we didn't expect. And this also tells me that if they're getting this close to the capital, we could be starting to see an end to this very soon. As far as who wins and who loses off of this, again, I look at some of this and I don't necessarily believe the information that's presented to us. So, while, yes, I understand that Russia is the aggressor and they've gone in to a country that's not theirs with force and violence, I don't necessarily believe that this is a completely unprovoked attack either. So, do I wish that Russia would get off Ukraine's lawn and leave their sovereignty alone? Yes, I do. Do I want U.S. involvement in it? No, I do not. And if everything that's presented to us is true, then Vladimir needs to get into his people's heads and say, hey, stop shooting civilians, you fucksticks. But I question that. I do. And we'll see what happens with that. Let's grab one from CNBC. A guide to what Russia and Ukraine want from the talks and where the red lines are, from Holly Elliott. As Russian forces pummel towns, villages, and cities across Ukraine, pressure is growing on officials from both sides to come to some sort of resolution, bringing an end to the destruction and bloodshed as soon as possible. Previous attempts at talks appear to have made little progress, with the demands of both sides seemingly far apart. But there's room for compromise and signs that discussions are heading in the right direction. In his nightly address on Monday, Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky said the talks have been pretty good. Meanwhile, Russia and discussions over the weekend had made substantial progress. A fifth round of talks are set to take place on Tuesday, with hopes that this impetus to reach a deal can continue. Here's the fifth round. Here's a brief guide, rather. What each side wants. So we'll start with Russia. What does Russia want? One of the biggest questions posed by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which began in earnest on February 24th, is what does Vladimir Putin want? Because it's not been entirely clear. Many close observers of the country have said that Putin's overreaching aim is to restore Russia's sphere of influence over the former Soviet territories like Ukraine, and to stop their slide towards the West. In the near term, Putin is seen wanting to topple Ukraine's pro-Western government and install pro-Russian puppet leadership there in a bid to bring Ukraine back to Russia's orbit. For its part, Russia has been clear in stating what it wants from talks with Ukraine. It wants legal guarantees that Ukraine will never be allowed to join NATO, the Western military alliance, and has said that it wants Ukraine to sign a neutrality agreement to change its constitution to cement this. I think that's a little bit far. Moscow has demanded that the Ukraine recognize the independence of two separatist pro-Russian republics in eastern Ukraine, the so-called People's Republics of Donetsk and Luhansk. It also demanded the Ukraine recognizes Crimea, which it annexed in 2014 as Russian territory, and it has called on Ukraine to cease all military activity. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said last week that the war will stop in a moment if Ukraine agrees to these demands. Russia has so much to lose from the war with Ukraine, really? Because it seems to me that they'll just keep throwing bodies at it until they win. And has already been largely isolated on a geopolitical, financial, and commercial stage, with business and brands pulling out of Russia in the wake of the war, and the West's imposition of wide-ranging and hard-hitting sanctions on Russia, leaving its economy in tatters. What does Ukraine want? Well, they want the US to be involved, they want to be allowed to go into NATO so that they never have to worry about this again, and they want the Russians off their fucking lawn. As what I'm guessing here before I read this. Zelensky summed up Ukraine's aim when he said Monday that his country wants a fair peace with Russia. He has insisted that the country is not willing to surrender or accept ultimatums from Russia. Ukraine has demanded a ceasefire with Russia, the withdrawal of Russian troops, and has said that it will not cede any of its territory to Russia. However, it's unclear whether this means it will refuse to recognize the breakaway pro-Russia republics in the Donbass or Crimea as Russian territory. And that's an interesting, it's an interesting concept to look at and see what's actually going to happen at the end of this. Now, I said from the beginning, before a single Russian troop set foot in the Ukraine, the first thing that I said was, if they just want to end this quickly, get this done and over with, if they actually want an end and not to have any fighting with all the troops that are gathered up around the Ukraine, the first thing that they should do is get a deal with the State Department, the State Departments rather, in Ukraine and Russia, that anybody who wants to leave in Donetsk and Luhansk can leave. Let the Ukraine keep the land, and the buildings, the industrial buildings. And anybody who wants to go back and join Russia, cross the border, no fear, they're Russian citizens. But it's interesting to me now because, number one, Crimea. Crimea is officially part of Russia at this point. Has been for 8 years. Almost a decade. So that's territory that's not going back to Zelensky. But the status of Donetsk and Luhansk, those are the things to watch for and see what happens on the world stage with that, because, as Russia has pointed out, they want them, or supposedly want them to be recognized as independent nations. As complete independents, complete new countries. And the big question there is, if that's actually true, if that's what Russia wants to say, who is to say that once Russia withdraws from Ukraine, they don't turn around and fold and just grab those regions and integrate them back into Russia? They are pro-Russia, after all. And I don't know the answer to that. But yes, as I said before, if at the very beginning, you just go out, make a deal, tell the people too, like, hey, it sucks that you gotta move, but, you gotta go. You clearly don't want to be a part of this country anymore. We're keeping the factories. You gotta go. Ukraine has also signaled that it may compromise on future NATO membership, saying it would be willing to forego membership if it receives security guarantees from the US and NATO. What the fuck is the difference? We're not going to join NATO, but we want to have security agreements from NATO. Ensuring its safety and security in addition to any agreement with Russia. An immediate priority for Ukraine has been the creation of humanitarian corridors to allow the safe evacuation of civilians, some of whom have been trying to survive under the siege and unable to escape. A key concern for Ukraine in recent weeks has been the southern port city of Mariupol. It's surrounded by Russian forces and been facing near constant shelling while food, water, and power in the city have become scarce and previous attempts at a ceasefire have failed. There has been mixed success at creating humanitarian corridors in Ukraine, with some being created but directing Ukrainians into Russia or its ally Belarus, while others have been scrapped amid reports of civilians coming under fire as they try to flee. It is hoped that more civilians will be able to evacuate Mariupol on Tuesday, after a large number of civilians left on Monday. So that's an idea of what it is that they're looking for. And honestly, again, from the side of both sides, I don't think their demands are outrageous completely. The only thing that I see is completely outrageous is taking land with all the factories on it, because that was the major industrial center of Ukraine, is Donetsk and Luhansk. Is that, well, and again, we don't know if Russia will recognize and keep those two countries as independent or fold them and annex them into Russia itself, but yeah, that's about the only thing that I see as outrageous is, hey, this region with all of our industrial production is no longer going to be a part of our country. What's this going to do to our economy? That's about the only part that I would say would be possibly unreasonable. But other than that, this all seems very reasonable. So, that's what we see off of that. From Fox News. Russia, Ukraine, Parliament of NATO, country Estonia calls for immediately establishment of no-fly zone. From Brooke Singman. The Parliament of Estonia on Monday called for UN member states to take immediate steps to establish a no-fly zone over Ukraine to prevent further civilian casualties as Russia's multi-front war against the country rages on. Estonia is the first NATO member nation to have a body formally called for implementation of a no-fly zone amid Russia's ongoing invasion. The Rizhikogu expresses its support to the defenders and the people of the state of Ukraine in their fight against the Russian Federation that has launched a criminal war, and calls on showing absolute support to Ukraine in its war for maintaining its freedom, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. Estonia's parliament said it underlines that Russia's unprovoked aggression and military activities constitutes a crime against peace with no statute of limitations, and that all war crimes have been committed will be punished. The Rijikogu says the UN member states to take immediate steps to establish a no-fly zone in order to prevent massive civilian casualties. In Ukraine, the body stated the Rijikogu urges all national parliaments to adopt statements that call on their governments to support the imposition of additional sanctions against the Russian Federation as well as the Republic of Belarus that participates in the aggression. Estonia's parliament also called for the immediate imposition of a comprehensive trade embargo with the Russian Federation and the Republic of Belarus, which would restrict the capability of the aggressor states to wage war. Isn't Estonia, locked away from the land by Belarus? Let's pull up the map and let's look. Okay, no, I am mistaken on that. That is incorrect. So they do have paths out. They can either take a short, boat ride out to Helsinki and go up through Finland and out through Norway, Sweden, etc. Or they can, if they have to trade, slip out through Latvia to Lithuania and into Poland. And also in, I don't know what country that is, but it appears, Kaliningrad rather. So it's got a couple options, I guess. I thought it just had to go through Russia or Belarus, but apparently it does not. I was to the understanding there was already a no-fly zone in most of these countries, especially for Russian people. I didn't realize that they still had the ability to fly through there. Well, I thought that happened a couple weeks ago. There's no no-fly zone in Ukraine, of course, obviously, but I was to the understanding that the US and most of the EU established no-fly zones already for the Russian Federation. And maybe they backed off just because Russia threatened to turn off Nord Stream 1. I'm not sure. But we'll see what happens with that. From the Hill. Graham says he would back a no-fly zone in Ukraine if Russia uses chemical weapons. Yeah, well, Graham, you just want to be in a war again. Senator Lindsey Graham said he would support a no-fly zone in Ukraine if Russian forces use chemical weapons on Ukrainian residents amid its ongoing invasion of the country, the Myrtle Beach Online reported. If Putin uses chemical weapons, sugar, it destroys the international regime around chemical weapons that we've tried to build up since World War II, baby. Graham told an audience at a University of South Carolina law event on Monday. If he goes down that road, it's an even larger war crime. Graham also said that if the U.S. doesn't take action to protect Ukrainians from a miserable death, Putin, along with other authoritarian leaders, would destroy a world order, according to the Myrtle Beach newspaper. Graham said at the law event that he doesn't favor deploying U.S. troops in Ukraine due to the country being outside of NATO's Mutual Defense Alliance, but he voiced skepticism that Putin would use nuclear weapons. He's a murderer. He's not suicidal. If he can make the decision, I think Russia General Staff will take care of the problem. Graham has previously suggested that Russians should assassinate Putin. He was criticized by lawmakers in both parties for those remarks, as well he should have been. But man, does he want to get into a war. Man, oh man, oh man, oh Friday, does he want to get into a war. From CNN, a protester interrupts live Russian state news broadcast to denounce invasion of Ukraine. Let's watch.
this remarkable moment, an employee of a Russian state television network interrupting a live news broadcast to protest the invasion of Ukraine.
Сотрудничество в рамках союзного государства, а на совещании в правительстве обсуждали, как сохранить...
Content on the outlet Russia TV1 is, of course, tightly controlled by the Russian government. The woman's sign read in Russian and English, "Stop the..."
Tightly controlled? Apparently not, because this woman managed to get herself up onto the stage with the sign. So I don't think that control is quite as tight as you guys think it is. It's like my control of the microphone when I step away from the desk for a second while we're listening to something.
The war, do not believe propaganda. They tell you lies here. CNN's Nina Dos Santos live in London with more. Nina, we know she's an employee, right? An editor at the station?
She's probably not an employee anymore. She's probably in the salt mines at this point. Or on the train to go to the salt mines. No war right at the top. And I don't read Cyrillic, so I don't know what the rest of that says, but I'm taking CNN's word for it at this point. Russians against war. So that's what we see off of that. From CNN Business, a woman holding a sign reading "No War" interrupted a live news broadcast on Russian state television Monday to denounce Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. "Stop the war! Do not believe propaganda! They tell you lies here," the sign reads. "Russians against war," the last line of the sign says in English. The woman who carried out the bold act of defiance was identified as, "Hey, we've never heard of that person before," an employee of Russia Channel 1. According to OVD-Info, an independent human rights protest monitoring group, the outlet's content is tightly controlled by the Russian government. And they never saw Maria again. CNN cannot independently verify the woman holding the sign is Ovsyannikova, but the photos on social media profiles bearing her name match the woman seen on the screen. There's no social media profile of this woman. This woman does not exist. Russian state news agency TASS confirmed OVD-Info's reporting, citing a source, and added that she could face persecution. Now, it's not that she could face persecution. Again, it's... people are going to say, hey, whatever happened to that editor, Maria Ovsyannikova? Whatever happened to her? Because I don't see her name in the credits anymore. And the network is going to come on and say, "We know not who this person is. Why you say this name? This person never existed." And she was never seen again. From CNBC, U.S. holds intense 7-hour talks with China amid Russia's war in the Ukraine. From Amanda Macias. Officials from the U.S., but probably not Biden, and China met on Monday to discuss a range of challenges facing their bilateral relationship, including Russia's war in Ukraine. A senior admin official described the talks, which were held in Rome, as intense and spanning at least 7 hours. The official who spoke to reporters on the condition of anonymity said that Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, conveyed to China's top diplomat, Yang Jiechi, that the U.S. is concerned Beijing may attempt to help Russia blunt global sanctions. Already is, dude. Already is. What I would say is that we have deep concerns about China's alignment with Russia, the official said. The National Security Advisor was direct about those concerns and the potential implications and consequences of certain actions. Sullivan's trip comes on the heels of reports that Moscow requests that China provide military equipment for its war in Ukraine, which is now in its 3rd week. The officials played down the timing of the trip when pressed by reporters. The meeting had been planned for some time, the official said, adding that schedules were coordinated last fall between the U.S. and Chinese officials. Beijing has denied reports it was asked by Moscow for military equipment or any other assistance to support its Ukraine invasion on Monday. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov denied allegations that Russia requested military aid from China. So this appears to be a regularly scheduled talk off of this, but you know, with what's happening in the world and the fact that the two countries touch each other, we got to talk about it. However, from CNN, China has expressed some openness to providing military and financial aid to Russia, U.S. cable suggests. From Kevin Liptak, Natasha Bertrand, Katie Bo Lillis, Kylie Atwood, and Jennifer Hansler. 5 authors for one article. The U.S. has information suggesting China has expressed some openness to providing Russia with requested military and financial assistance as part of its war on Ukraine. A Western official and a U.S. diplomat told CNN and is conveying what it knows to its NATO allies. It is not clear yet whether China intends to provide Russia with that assistance, U.S. officials familiar with intelligence tell CNN, but during an intense 7-hour meeting in Rome, a top aide to President Biden warned his Chinese counterpart of potential implications and consequences for China should support for Russia be forthcoming, a senior admin official said. The series of events underscored the growing concern among American officials at the budding partnership between Moscow and Beijing as Biden works to isolate and punish Russia for its aggression in Ukraine. Biden is not the one that's doing that, by the way. While officials have said the Chinese president was alarmed at what was taking place since Russian invade, there's little to indicate that China is prepared to cut off its support entirely. That leaves open a troubling possibility for American officials that China may help prolong a bloody conflict that's increasingly killing civilians while also cementing an authoritarian alliance in direct competition with the U.S. In a diplomatic cable, the U.S. relayed to its allies in Europe and Asia that China had conveyed willingness to assist Russia, which has asked for military support. The cable did not state definitively that assistance has been provided. One official also said the U.S. warned in the cable that China would likely deny it was willing to provide assistance. Most likely. That's probably a true thing. That's probably a true statement. And from Reuters, U.S. warns China not to help Russia as anti-war protests disrupt state TV. This is a review of the last 2 articles we talked about. We'll hold off on that. And we will talk about this one, though. China says it wants to steer clear of U.S. sanctions over Russia's invasion of Ukraine. From Sam Meredith. China's foreign minister, Wang Yi, says Beijing wants to avoid being impacted by U.S. sanctions over Russia's war with the Ukraine. China is not party to a crisis, nor does it want sanctions to affect China, Wang said on Monday during a call with Spanish counterpart Jose Manuel Alvarez to discuss the crisis in Ukraine. China has right to safeguard its legitimate rights and interests. His comments are seen as one of Beijing's most explicit statements yet on the unprecedented barrage of international sanctions imposed against Russia's corporate and financial systems. The measures came in response to the Kremlin's full-scale offensive in Ukraine, which began on February 24th. The White House has warned China not to provide Russia with any economic lifeline. As the Kremlin steps up its onslaught on Ukraine, the U.S. says it fears China, a key strategic ally of Moscow, may seek to cushion the impact of measures designed to destroy Russia's economy if the war continues. There are concerns among market participants that Chinese companies could soon be embroiled in financial penalties after reports that Moscow had asked Beijing for assistance to support its Ukraine invasion. China has denied these reports, while Russia has said it did not request military aid from Beijing. So right now, both sides of the argument are saying, no, we didn't do it. And most people don't trust either side in the argument. As far as whether or not they did it, that I can't tell you. I'm pretty positive that China has been bankrolling Russia throughout this entire thing, though. Because they are deep allies, and they're right next to each other. And once again, China may not have the naval capability to go and hit Taiwan. And most people try to tell me that Russia scrapped their sub program in their navy, but, you know, if they're that desperate for a warm water port, I don't know if that's true or not. I do think that there's going to be some sort of quid pro quo of, hey, we helped you, come help us take Taiwan. So we'll see what happens with that. UN chief warns that war is hurting poor countries, from the Associated Press. The UN chief warned on Monday that Russia's war on Ukraine is holding a sword of Damocles over a global economy, especially poor countries that are developing, that face skyrocketing food, fuel, fertilizer prices, and are now seeing their breadbaskets being bombed. Secretary General Antonio Guterres told reporters that Russia and Ukraine represent more than half the world's supply of sunflower oil. Well, stop eating seed oils, first and foremost. And about 30% of the world's wheat and that grain prices have already exceeded those at the start of Arab Springs and the food riots of 07 to 08. He told reporters that 45 African, at least developed countries, import at least 1/3 of their wheat from Ukraine and Russia, and 18 of them import at least 50%. These countries include Egypt, Congo, I didn't know Egypt was considered a poor country. Egypt, Congo, Burkina Faso, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen, he said. Hold on. Hold up. Lebanon, Libya, and Yemen are not in Africa. Anyway, all this is hitting the poorest and the hardest and planting the seeds for political instability and unrest around the globe. So, yeah, I mean, this is hurting other countries as well. I mean, this is not just hurting Ukraine. As we become more globalized and people depend on more of the world to go and get their stuff, yeah, you're going to start to see supply chain stuff that happens with that. And what have I always said? Get some extra cans of food right now. Plant a garden. I have a milk jug garden going on in my living room or my kitchen right now. I've got 2 tomato plants, several broccoli plants, and a pepper plant that are ready to go start putting out plants. And I've got several more seedlings started. Plant a garden. Do something. Get more involved. Be more self-sufficient. You should always be more self-sufficient because, as it is, I mean, some of these countries can't be self-sufficient right now because they have been plagued by political instability from many of their neighbors. But take the example from them. Be self-sufficient for yourself. All right, let's grab one from CNBC. Putin's invasion of Ukraine will knock 30 years of progress off the Russian economy. From Christina Wilkie. Putin's unprovoked war in Ukraine and the resulting global response will set Russia's economy back at least 30 years, close to the old Soviet Union times, and lower its standards of living for at least the next 5 years, according to economists, investors, and diplomats. The sweeping Western sanctions are designed to inflict maximum pain on the country's economy by expelling it from global markets and freezing assets around the world. From the moment they took effect 3 weeks ago, the sanctions have also opened a new chapter in Russia's economic history. Its financial system and currency are collapsing in multiple fronts, forcing the Kremlin to close the stock market and artificially prop up the ruble inside of its borders. Practically overnight, the country's 40-year effort to build a prosperous market-based economy that began under former leader Mikhail Gorbachev has failed. One more casualty in President Putin's brutal invasion of the Ukraine. Landmark economic and social reforms originating in the 80s gave the Soviet Union its first taste of American products, but decades of work to integrate the economy into Europe ended in the past few weeks as the blue chip companies quit the Russian market and the US and EU moved to wind down trade and tourism with Russia. Two sanctions in particular have wreaked considerable havoc. The first one expelled Russia's largest banks from the global payments network known as SWIFT, making it very difficult for them to process overseas transactions. The second measure froze hundreds of billions of euros held in reserve by Russia's central bank. Without reserve funds to shore up the ruble, there is very little the Kremlin can do to prevent its value from collapsing. So, and this is a part of the plan for doing the sanctions, was to make the people upset with Putin. As far as whether this needs to happen or not, I don't know. But I know that most countries around the world are 2 missed meals away from a revolution. And I'm willing to bet that at least a few people in our government want to see a people's revolution up against Putin at this point. So that's what we see from that. From Fox, KTZed talked about this last night. Musk challenges Putin to a single combat over Ukraine. Russia responds, weakling. From Danielle Wallace. Elon Musk wrote to his 77.7 million Twitter followers on Monday that he was challenging Russian President Vladimir Putin to single combat and wagering Ukraine. I hereby challenge Vladimir Putin to single combat, Musk wrote, using Putin's Russian name. He added, stakes are Ukraine, using the Ukrainian spelling for Ukraine. In Cyrillic script and tagging the Kremlin's official account, Musk asked, do you agree to the fight? And there it is. The tweet prompted nearly immediate response from the head of the Russian space agency, Roscosmos, who has traded wars of words with Musk in the past. You little devil are still young, Dmitry Rogozin, Director General of Roscosmos, since 2018 wrote, compete with me, weakling. It would only be waste of time. Overtake my brother first. Rogozin then cited the 17th fairy tale by Russian poet A.S. Pushkin titled The Tale of the Priest and His Workman Balda. The story is about a lazy Russian Orthodox priest who elects a simpleton as a cheap laborer, who then ends up outsmarting his master and driving him crazy in the end. Ukrainian Vice Prime Minister Mikhailo Fedorov chimed in, I'm sure that Elon Musk can send Putin to Jupiter. Well, at least we have entertainment. That's all that I can say off of that. From the Daily Wire. I'm sorry, from The Hill first, and then the Daily Wire. Panel on The View calls for the DOJ to probe Tucker Carlson over Putin rhetoric. From Dominic Mastrancelli.
President Putin.
Shut up, Saki. The co-host of The View on Monday slammed Fox News pundit Tucker Carlson for a number of comments he made in recent weeks about Russian President Vladimir Putin and suggested the host be investigated by the DOJ over them. I think the DOJ, in the same way that is setting up a task force to investigate oligarchs, should look into people who are Russian propagandists or shilling for Putin, host Ana Navarro said. If you're a foreign asset to a dictator, you should be investigated. Several of the show's co-hosts expressed agreements with as Navarro spoke. Oh, well, yeah, it's just cluck, cluck, cluck over and over again. Navarro's assertion came amid a discussion about an article in Mother Jones this week outlining a reportedly leaked memo from the Kremlin that suggested it is essential to use as much as possible fragments of broadcasts of the popular Fox News host Tucker Carlson as part of its propaganda efforts during the invasion of Ukraine. Carlson, Fox's top-rated host, has drawn widespread criticism in the U.S. for his comments about Putin and the war, and I'm blissfully unaware of what it is that he had to say about Russia because I think he's a fucking moron. in which he did question why Americans should care about the conflict and described it as a border dispute. The bombastic host has suggested to his viewers that Democrats and media figures are telling American people they should hate Putin and support the war with Russia. No, they've been doing that for 5 years. Literally, and I've said this right off the top. I can't believe anything the news media is saying about this conflict in Ukraine because I know the American people have been propagandized to by the mainstream media that Russia is the root of all evil, and Russia is the root of all evil because they put the evil orange man into office. Has Putin ever called me a racist? Has he threatened to get me fired for disagreeing with him? Has he shipped every middle-class job in my town to Russia? Did he manufacture a worldwide pandemic that wrecked my business and kept me indoors for 2 years? Carlson asked during a recent episode of his popular primetime show. Other controversial figures, like former Rep. Tulsi Gabbard, who has made several appearances on Carlson's show to speak on various topics, has falsely suggested Ukraine is making chemical and biological weapons. You don't know that. I'm sorry, you don't know that. I come out and say it. I don't know if they're making them or not. But I have the honesty to at least come out and say it. You just come, it's falsely claimed. Don't look over here. The same people at the Hill, in fact, came out and told us that the Wuhan lab wasn't U.S. funded. That was determined to be a lie. U.S. officials say Russian propagandists have used the theory as a pretext for a potential attack. The panelists on The View likened Gabbard's recent comments to Carlson's rhetoric on Putin and admonished them for helping the Kremlin's efforts. I hate that we're even discussing it. I think to myself, who is this woman? She's no longer in Congress. The fact that we're giving her oxygen is what makes her relevant, Navarro said of Gabbard. On the other hand, how do you not call out something like that? Is repeating false Russian propaganda and has been brought down. This is a video citation that they have to say.
Back as our guest co-host is CNN political commentator and former White House communications director, Alyssa Farah Griffin. Hello. So, Fox News' host, Tucker Carlson, is apparently a big hit in Russia right now.
Yeah.
The website Mother Jones posted a leaked Kremlin war memo instructing Russian state media to play Tucker Carlson clips as much as possible. And Tulsi Gabbard is being accused of spreading Russian false flag propaganda. Here's what they've both been saying about the war. Take a look.
Democrats in Washington have told you have a patriotic duty to hate Vladimir Putin. It's not a suggestion, it's a mandate. Anything less than hatred for Putin is treason. Hating Putin has become the central purpose of America's foreign policy. Secret biolabs? Like the secret biolabs Ukraine definitely doesn't have? Ukraine has those? Yes, it does.
There are 25 to 30 U.S.-funded biolabs in Ukraine. According to the U.S. government, these biolabs are conducting research on dangerous pathogens. Now, like COVID, these pathogens know no borders. If they are inadvertently or purposely breached or compromised, they will quickly spread all throughout Europe, the United States, and the rest of the world, causing untold suffering and death.
So Mitt Romney claims Gabbard is pushing treasonous lies that could cost lives. So I'm just going to open it up to the table. What the hell's going on?
So I think.
So that's what they use. That's what they have to say about that. And again, we're at a point right now where if you question the official narrative, it is treason. They call anybody who says that COVID wasn't that bad treasonous. They call anybody who says, hey, I have questions about what's happening, and not even like going as far as Stephen does, where, no, this is definitely, Ukraine is the bad guy in all this, and Russia is just defending themselves, and might makes right and all this. Not going that far, but just questioning, hey, I don't know if what they're telling us is entirely true. Can somebody back this up? That's treasonous. So forgive me if I don't believe what they have to say about treason with that. But Gabbard has to fire back, and that's why I switched the order of these two real quick. From the Daily Wire, Gabbard fires back at Romney for calling her a treasonous Russian propagandist. And by the way, at The View, they love Mitt Romney because he stood against the evil orange man. Until he goes to try to run against another Democrat. Former Rep. Tulsi Gabbard fired back at Mitt Romney on Monday for calling her a treasonous Russian propagandist over the weekend, saying that he either needed to prove her wrong or admit that he was wrong and resign. Well, he should just resign anyway. Do we have screenshots? We don't have screenshots. That's fine. Tulsi Gabbard is parroting false Russian propaganda, Romney tweeted. Her treasonous lies may well cost lives. It's not clear which specific comments from Gabbard to which Romney was referring, but she did claim in the video that she posted to social media over the weekend that there are 25 to 30 U.S.-funded biolabs in Ukraine that are conducting research on dangerous pathogens. In the video, Gabbard called for a ceasefire until the labs could be secured and the pathogens inside the labs destroyed. Gabbard laid out her case for why what she said was true in a lengthy thread on Twitter, saying Romney needed to provide evidence for calling her treasonous. Senator Romney, please provide evidence that what I said is untrue and treasonous, Gabbard wrote. If you cannot, you should do the honorable thing. Apologize and resign from the Senate. So, Senator Romney, you have a choice. Out of pride, continue to deny the truth, or admit you are wrong and apologize and resign. Aloha, she later added. And remember, without the truth, we can neither be safe nor free. Well, Romney should resign anyway. There are biological laboratories in Ukraine which the WHO has contacted and advised to destroy dangerous pathogens that could escape during the war. Biosecurity experts say Russia's movement of troops into Ukraine and bombardment of its cities have raised the risk of an escape of a disease-causing pathogen should any of those facilities be damaged, Reuters reported. Like how many other countries, Ukraine has public health laboratories researching how to mitigate the threats of dangerous diseases affecting both animals and humans, including most recently the pinko fucking pox. Its labs have received support from the US, the EU, and the WHO. So, definitely would like to learn more about those labs, but, researching them will get you put on a government list, so we'll see what happens. Alright, and that's what I have to say about the Ukraine. We've got a couple other things to talk about. More locally, of course. And then we'll do Twitter trending and head out of here for the day. From the New York Post. Manchin to block Federal Reserve nominee Sarah Raskin, likely sinking candidacy. From Stephen Nelson. And by the way, that last name should sound familiar, and I saved the Google search off of this, so before we look into that, you guys have heard of Raskin before, Jamie Raskin, one of the key architects of the January 6th narrative. So look at what it says over here on the About section. Sarah Bloom Raskin is an American attorney and a regulator who was formerly a member of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System and a former U.S. Deputy Secretary of the Treasury. Born April 15th, 1961, age 60 in Medford, Massachusetts. Spouse Jamie Raskin. Again, one of the key architects of the Selfie Fest narrative. The Daily Life section. Not just for anti-Semitism anymore. Manchin's surprise announcement handed the White House a significant defeat after it invested time defending Raskin's contentious candidacy. It follows Manchin blowing up Biden's $2 trillion Build Back Bullshit Act in December. Manchin said in a statement that now more than ever, the U.S. must have policy leaders and economic experts who are focused on the most pressing issues facing the American people and our nation, specifically rising inflation and energy costs. I've carefully reviewed Sarah Bloom Raskin's qualifications and previous public statements. Her previous public statements have failed to satisfactorily address my concerns about the critical importance of financing all of the above energy policy to meet our nation's critical energy needs, Manchin said. He added, "This is a 10-year term to perhaps the most important independent body that's tasked with ensuring the stability of the American economy. At this historic moment for both the U.S. and the world at large, it's imperative the Federal Reserve Board preserve its independence and steers clear of any hints of partisanship. So if they wanted to put someone on the Federal Reserve who is married to somebody in Congress who is one of the architects of the selfie fest narrative, and nobody saw a problem with this. From The Blaze, GOP bill would eliminate the Biden ATF's database on gun sales. And the people rejoiced. Yay. If you guys haven't watched Monty Python and the Holy Grail in a while, I suggest you do that. It still holds up. I watched it on... What the fuck did I watch that on? Sunday? Yeah, I watched that on Sunday. It still holds up. I haven't seen it since I was like 19. Congressional Republicans have introduced a bill that would eliminate the Federal Reserve's database of firearms purchases and prevent the Biden admin from collecting data on gun sales from dealers who go out of business. The proposed legislation is called the No Retaining Every Gun in a System That Restricts Your Rights Act and was introduced by Michael Cloud of Texas, who said the bill is designed to prevent the federal government from creating a firearms registry. Cloud filed the bill in response to reports from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, is in possession of nearly 1 billion records detailing gun purchases by American citizens. The ATF collected this information under a provision of federal law that requires licensed firearms or ammunition dealers to submit records to the Department of Justice when their business is discontinued. The Gun Control Act of '68 requires stores that close down to turn over their records of gun transactions for the past 20 years to the federal government, though the Biden admin has sought to remove the 20-year restriction to collect records in perpetuity. Gun rights advocates say that this would be the first step towards the development of a national gun registry, which could be abused by the government to interfere with Americans' Second Amendment rights. Not a bad thought. I don't think that it's going to pass, obviously. But it's nice to have some of these bills brought up for the next time somebody with some sanity is in the White House. But since by that time the rest of us will be long since dead, it's still a good idea to have stuff like that out there, so we'll see what happens with that. More gun news from 10 WBNS. DeWine signs bill removing concealed gun training permits. From the Associated Press. Mike DeWine signed into law Monday a measure that will make concealed weapons permits optional for anyone legally allowed to carry a gun and eliminate the requirements that individuals promptly notify police officers that they're carrying a concealed weapon. Ohio's GOP-controlled legislature passed the bill earlier this month, and DeWine's spokesperson had signaled the government would likely sign it. The measure, dubbed constitutional carrier by its backers, is one of several GOP-backed proposals in recent years seeking to expand gun rights in Ohio. It was introduced by GOP State Senator Terry Johnson of Southern Ohio's Scioto County, who said it eliminates a discrepancy in Ohio law that it currently allows people to openly carry a gun. And the people rejoiced. Yay! The Buckeye Firearms Association said 21 other states allow people to carry a concealed weapon without a license. Gun control groups such as Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America opposed it, as did law enforcement groups concerned about the legislation's lack of required training. The Ohio Democratic Party accused the governor of caving to special interest groups as extremists, saying the measure will make all Ohioans less safe. Well, that's the thing, is if in Youngstown, you've got a person who's coming up here, going after somebody, now has to think, like, hey, does that dude have a gun? Maybe. Hey, he doesn't look like he has a gun, so maybe I'll smash and grab, and maybe I'll die. It puts a significantly higher risk onto simple pickpockets and muggings. And of course, on top of all this, it makes it harder for the government or a foreign entity to come in and try to take over. So, hooray. Hooray for Ohio. From the Hill. JP Morgan to lift ban on hiring unvaccinated individuals. Yeah, the pandemic is over. They just needed a Russian invasion to come back out and hide the fact that they were trying to do this. From Olafimihan Ocean. You know what? The next time I read an article from this guy, I'm just going to call him Olaf. And I'm going to picture him as a snowman. US-based multinational financial institution JP Morgan Chase & Company has announced that it will lift its ban on hiring individuals due to their unvaccinated status against the pinko fucking pox. In a memo obtained by Bloomberg, JP Morgan said it will also end mandatory testing for unvaccinated employees by April 4th and that the company's mask mandate will become voluntary for both vaccinated and unvaccinated staff. JP Morgan's memo also noted that the company's New York City employees are still required to follow the city's vaccination requirements. The mandate will also be required unless the city lifts its vaccine order, according to Bloomberg News. Give it time. This is still wildly unpopular, and this is still an election year. Across the U.S., we continue to see cases decline, restrictions lifted, and more flexibility with daily activities. We're learning to live with COVID as part of our new normal, the bank said in its memo to its employees. Which means that they are hurting for people desperately. And they don't care about that, and they never cared about this thing to begin with. Let's be completely honest about that. From the Blaze. Nancy Pelosi claims more government spending is reducing the national debt. And there's video. And the good people at the Blaze queued up the video to start at the point that they wanted to talk to it about. From Chris Enlow. House Speaker Pelosi defied basic economics on Friday, claiming that increased government spending is reducing national debt, not contributing to the economic crisis. The Biden admin began last week blaming Russian President Vladimir Putin for growing economic problems, despite inflation and gas prices being issues before Russia invaded Ukraine. The shifting blame game comes as President Brandon begins a renewed push to revive his social spending agenda, which was killed last year when Manchin refused to support it. Deflecting blame for economic woes is a strategic political move because a majority of voters believe the economy is heading in the wrong direction and believe Republicans can fix it. Well, let's listen to what she has to say.
Force development and all of that. One other point I will make about it is that what we are doing in our legislation, what we would do in the Build Back Better, 17 Nobel laureates in economics said that legislation does not increase inflation. It is non-inflationary because of the way it is written. The imprimatur, if you get it, the kiss of death if you don't. The Joint Tax Committee has said that the BBB would add $100 billion so that is subtracted from the national debt, saves $100 billion over 10 years. But we have to live in a year where even though the bill's for 10 years, they measure it for 20 years, and the imprimatur said $1 trillion over 20 years is saved. So when we're having this discussion, it's important to dispel some of those who say, well, it's the government spending. No, it isn't. The government spending is doing the exact reverse, reducing the national debt. It is not inflationary, A. B, we don't want to reduce the increase in jobs, which we're very proud of. This president breaking records, his historic numbers of jobs created in the first year of his term in office, and a lot of it traced to the American Recovery Act.
Is the booze wearing off? Is that why she can't speak? Is that what's going on with this? Now, as I said on KTZed Redemption last night, I pointed out the fact that there's some truth to what Mrs. Pelosi has to say. Not a lot of it, but there's some truth to that. Government spending can pay down the national debt if you can appropriate the funds properly in a budget. Now, I've looked through the Build Back Bullshit plan, and looking at the funding mechanism for that, it's unfunded, first and foremost. Because you can't just pull that kind of money from wealth transfers. It doesn't work. You can appropriate all of the wealth from the upper 1%, and it still won't pay this bill over time. So, yeah, for the person who's the Speaker of the House, that woman has no idea what the hell she's talking about. But I think you all already knew that. From Fox 8. Senator Rand Paul introduces an amendment to eliminate Fauci's position. From Chris Bell. U.S. Senator and physician Rand Paul on Monday introduced an amendment that would eliminate Dr. Fauci's position as America's top doctor. The move would also divide his current position as Director of National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and replace it with 3 new directors into 3 separate new institutes. The National Institute of Allergic Diseases, the National Institute of Infectious Diseases, and the National Institute of Immunological Diseases. So I've not read the amendment yet. I will, and I will also post this into the Discord, where you guys can see it. But this is the amendment. It's 8 pages. To prepare for and respond to existing viruses, emerging new threats, and pandemics, refer to the committee on blank in order to be printed. Ordered to lie on the table and be printed. Amendment intended to be proposed by, at the appropriate place in Subtitle A, Title 1, insert the following. The Division of National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Organization of National Research Institutes. There are the 3 that it's going to split off into. And I do think that it's about time for this. I really do. And I would like to go and read through the rest of this as well and see what all is still said about all this. Reason being is because, well, number one, we saw just how much power one person can have if he is the head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. He's got way too much power in and of himself. So, yeah, it's about time for them to go be pulled down and just pull some of the power out of some of these bureaucratic executive branch departments as well. If the people want to be, if they want to be controlled, then that should be between them and the representative. I wouldn't even allow the Senate to have a say in that at this point. Let the representatives vote on it. And yes, I understand how much of a problem that is with the current makeup of representatives in this country, but let the representatives have a say in whether or not you lock down, because they actually represent your district. But as far as the executive branch departments go, I don't see that one going away. So it's a nice thought, but I don't see it's going to be. I can't wait to go back and read this whole thing and see what it says. From the Daily Wire, Blaze Media's Sarah Gonzalez releases footage of Beto staffer officer getting physical with her in front of the candidate. From Amanda Prestigiacomo. Blaze Media's Sarah Gonzalez released footage of a staffer for Democratic Texas gubernatorial candidate Beto O'Rourke and a female officer with the Dallas Police Department getting physical with her while she was taking a video of the candidate. The video appears to show an O'Rourke staffer, who Gonzalez has identified as Cynthia Cano, grabbing at Gonzalez's phone, and a female officer, who Gonzalez has identified as Jackia Miles, subsequently pushing her without warning. Here's the moment Beto O'Rourke staffer assaulted me right in front of him and tried to take my phone, and a Dallas police officer joins the assault while saying, "I don't even gotta touch your phone, I can just touch you." Does DPD serve the taxpayers or the Democratic machine? Let's watch.
And my question was...
Oh, sorry, we're not recording. No, sorry. Don't touch my phone. We're not recording. Don't touch my phone. Excuse me. What's your badge number? Why did you just push me down the... That's fine, but why did she just put her hands on me so hard?
She asked you to leave and you're not leaving.
No, she didn't. She didn't ask me to leave at all. She pushed me down the stairs.
I'm telling you to leave.
What is your badge number? Hey, I appreciate you being respectful and not putting your hands on me. Thank you.
Yeah, that's probably not the way to go about things. Gonzalez, on Saturday, said the DPD told her they do not have body cam footage of the incident. When the Daily Wire asked the department about the matter, we were told, due to the incident being under investigation, we will not be able to disclose any further information. O'Rourke posed with Miles for a photo and posted it to his Instagram following the event, saying, "Big thanks to Officer Miles for being with us at our town hall and for serving our community each day." So yeah, that all kind of looks like an inside job, doesn't it? Well, at least we've got some footage off of that, and something can be posted into evidence. We'll see what happens with that. From WISN, our local ABC affiliate over here in Wisconsin. Gun Kyle Rittenhouse used in Kenosha shootings has been destroyed. Rifle destroyed in state crime lab on February 25th.
Okay, and begin.
Ready? All right. All right, contents of the box. We have one sight mark, red dot sight, one Magpul PMag, 30 rounder, and one Smith & Wesson M&P AR-15, serial number TF20210. Crime lab numbers here. Unit numbers of the officers from Kenosha bringing the weapon there. Okay.
Ms. Williams, you ever seen that firearm?
Yes, I recognize this as the firearm that I analyzed for case number R202992. Item designation is item A. My initials are on this firearm, HAW, as well as the date that I analyzed this specific firearm, which was 12/1 of 2020.
And do you recognize that weapon to be the weapon you examined in the Kyle Rittenhouse case?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so pursuant to an agreement between both parties and approved by the court, the Rittenhouse rifle will be destroyed at the State Crime Laboratory on this 25th day of February 2022 by mechanical shredding.
So, just taking a couple photographs of it.
You can cut whatever you want to cut these.
I don't know if you want to.
F. So, reading from what WISN had to say, the gun Rittenhouse used to shoot 3 people in Kenosha, killing 2 of them, has been destroyed. The rifle was destroyed by the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. This gun has been in police custody since the shootings. Rittenhouse said he wanted the gun destroyed. His lawyer filed a request to return the rifle along with other personal items back to his client. The other items have been returned. Technically, Dominic Black is the owner of the gun that he bought for Rittenhouse. Richard said one of the reasons they wanted it destroyed is because they didn't want Black to sell the gun and profit. Richard said there were inquiries to buy the gun. Yeah, I would have bought the thing. It's the same reason Rittenhouse wanted his clothing back from the night of the shooting. WISN was not allowed to witness the gun's destruction. And yet, we just watched it happen on WISN. So, the gun is no more. That would have made a great museum piece for somebody, but... Ron Howell says the rifle didn't even fight back. Yes, it proves it was an inanimate object. No, it was a sentient killing machine. Alright. Just a couple more here, then we'll do Twitter trending and head out of here for the day. From CNN, House Democrats to Biden use climate action to restart negotiations on spending bill. From Ellen Nilsen. A group of 89 House Democrats, including progressives and moderates, sent a letter to President Biden on Monday, urging him to restart negotiations on a Democrat-only spending bill centered around climate action. The letter comes a few weeks after Joe Manchin of West Virginia opened the door to new negotiations by outlining what he wants to see in a Democrat-only spending bill. Manchin previously said he wants to pass tax reforms and measures to reduce the deficit, but also said revenue from what should be put towards the climate funding. Meanwhile, Democrats in the House want to start with policies that address the climate crisis. More than $555 billion in climate investments in the House-passed Build Back Bullshit Act can serve as a building block to restart negotiations. The groups of House Democrats wrote in the letter to Biden, "Given the widespread agreement in the U.S. Senate for House-passed climate provisions, we have an opportunity to recommend negotiations with climate serving as a key starting point." Sean Casten of Illinois, Jamal Bowman of New York, and Nikema Williams of Georgia led the letter, members signing, including Representatives Alexandria Ocasio-Chavez, D. Twitch, and Kathy Castro of Florida. Castro serves as the chair of the House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis. It's unclear whether Manchin will want to replicate the $555 billion worth of clean energy and climate spending in Biden's original Build Back Bullshit Act, or trim that figure down as well. Well, realistically, we can't have that trimmed down because otherwise the big business buddies who are going to profit off of it under the table by laundering the money, they're not going to get their cut. So they're going to desperately try to get this pushed through still somehow, some way, because they need a win before midterms. They desperately need something to try to keep the progressives on board coming up in midterms, and I don't think they have it. I don't think they have it, but they're going to try. And the last one, before we do Twitter trending and head out of here for the day, comes to us from The Blaze. Man reportedly calls 911 asking deputies to test his meth, alleging his dealer cheated him. They happily oblige and then place him under arrest. Authorities said they're pleased to provide the service free of charge. From Bill Shiver. Authorities in Hernando County, Florida couldn't believe their ears last week when one resident called 911 with undoubtedly one of the strangest requests they've ever received. At approximately 7 p.m. Thursday, an adult man called police dispatchers to request that deputies come to his Spring Hill home to test the methamphetamine he'd recently purchased from his drug dealer, police said. Thomas Eugene Colucci was apparently suspicious that his dealer had cheated him by selling fake meth, and was eager to see if the hypothesis was correct. Needless to say, deputies happily obliged. The bizarre incident was documented in a post in the Hernando County Sheriff's Office Facebook page. In the post, Sheriff's Office recounted that upon arrival, deputies conducted interviews with Colucci, during which he freely admitted to them that he recently purchased the methamphetamine from a male he met at a local bar. However, he said that after having used some of it, he came to believe the contents were not meth but actually bath salts. He told deputies he knew this because he was an experienced drug user who had used meth before, and he knew what it should feel like. Colucci then produced 2 small baggies, each containing a white crystal-like substance. He gave them to deputies. He reportedly claimed that he wanted his stash tested, so others wouldn't go to purchase fake meth from the same individual who sold it to him. Evidently, the substance Colucci had reportedly purchased did not provide the expected sensation, officials quipped in the post. He further requested the deputies put the person in trouble for selling dangerous drugs, though according to officials he was unable to provide a name or any contact info for his dealer. Nevertheless, deputies performed a field test on the samples, and to Colucci's surprise, both came back positive for meth. Deputies arrested Colucci and charged him with 1 count of possession of meth and 2 counts of possession of drug paraphernalia. He's currently being held at the Hernando County Detention Center on a $7,000 bond. Hello, officer! I have an illegal drug. I want you to see if it's an illegal drug that I just bought it. You're not going to do anything bad for me, right? This is the world we live in, folks. Meth will do that to you, apparently. Alright, and the last thing we do before we head out of here on a Tuesday is we check the Twitter trending and see what is trending right now. So let's get the Explore page over here and let's have a look. I know we're running a little bit long right now, but we'll see what happens with that. Really? There we go. U.S. trends. Number 1, Miles Jack. Adam Schefter tweets out, after Monday's spending spree, the Jaguars are releasing linebacker Miles Jack per source. Jack led the Jaguars in tackles last season with 108. Really? I don't know why the fuck they would do something like that, but apparently, yeah. They're just going to let him go after he worked his ass off. Yeah, how are they going to run the ball? Tell me. I haven't seen a moment of football this year, so I don't know how good this guy is, but apparently for 108 tackles, according to the stats, he's pretty good. I don't know what the hell they did that for, but, well, I guess we'll figure out. Number 2 trend, Miss Marvel. "2022 MCU Phase 4 posters, just don't miss Miss Marvel." The future is in our hands. Miss Marvel, an original series from Marvel Studios, starts streaming June 8th. Miss Marvel will be the next Marvel series to premiere on Disney Plus after Moon Knight. I'm not familiar with the Miss Marvel character. I thought that was going to be the same as Captain Marvel. But, I mean, it's worth looking at least. It's worth having a look and seeing what it's all about. I've been watching the Marvel movies, the MCU movies, and I'm not entirely impressed by the representations from the comics after First Avenger. That one I liked. But it's kind of interesting to see where Disney has tried to take this as well and tried to wokeify it. But we'll see what happens with that. The Ides of March. March 15th is the Ides of March, a day many believe to be unlucky after it became notoriously known as the day of Julius Caesar's assassination. Just a reminder to Russians close to Putin, tomorrow's the Ides of March. You know what to do, Warmonger Bette Midler. Princess Consuelo Banana Hammock says, have a safe Ides of March. Caesar quoted saying, I came out to have a good time and I'm honestly feeling so attacked right now. My pen holder on my desk and I can only apologize. Caesar, dictator for life. So, that's what we see off of that. Number 4, Equal Pay Day. This year, Equal Pay Day falls on March 15th, marking the point at which the average U.S. woman catches up to what the average man earned in 2021. Has this not been completely debunked yet? Seriously. And of course, they come out and they pull in the earnings of all women who take time off for childcare purposes versus the wages of all men, combined and then divided among all people in both groups, averaged back out. But they're going to still try to come out and tell you that there's a gender pay gap somewhere out there, including an EO that encourages banning federal contractors from seeking information about job applicants' prior salary history. Alright, and the last one we'll do, number 6, because we'll skip the Tuesday vibes. Mac Wilson, another NFL one here. Jim McBride tweets out, breaking, the Patriots have traded linebacker Chase Winovich to the Browns in exchange for linebacker Mac Wilson, according to a league source. Yeah, it's got to be fun being in New England right now, especially, you lost Brady, and then you got to have maybe a little bit of dance after he went back and retired from Tampa Bay. And then just this past week, he came back and announced again that, you know what? Retirement's boring. I still want to go play football. And now they're trying to pull up whoever they can to round out their roster. And, New England, like Green Bay, got spoiled for a long time. They had great coaching and a great quarterback for a very, 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 very long time. And they don't know what to do with themselves now that they don't have those things. But, we'll sit back, we'll watch, and we'll see what happens with it. Hopefully, Chase Winovich does well in Cleveland and Mac Wilson does well for New England. We'll see what happens with that. And with that, we're going to head out of here for the day. So, let's change the track here. And let's finish out. It's 9:30 already. So, thanks everybody who came by and chatted, hung out with us in the live chat, talked about what's going on. F in the chat for Ron Helt's computer, F in the chat for Rittenhouse's gun. We will see you here next time. We'll probably be back here tomorrow with a lot more news headlines. It'll probably be a little bit more packed than it was today, so hopefully we'll get some stuff in here, but hopefully still low enough where we can get through everything as well. So we'll see what happens there. Come back and join me tomorrow morning for more Contemporary. Stick around if you're on Twitch. We'll go rating. And until then, we will see you next time. And I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Take care.